Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special hash rate. Today, we're going to do Bittensor, the basics, taking it from the beginning and explaining everything simply. I've had a lot of requests for this, so I'm just going to take a moment and take it from the top and assume you know absolutely nothing about this. So at its really most basic level, Bittensor, it's a coin. It's like Bitcoin. There are only 21 million TAO tokens that can ever exist, and TAO is the root token of the Bittensor ecosystem. At the moment, there's 8.6 million TAO tokens that have been created or mined to date. That's all that's in circulation. The price of the TAO coin at the moment is about $300 per coin, and the total market cap of the circulating supply is 2.7 billion. So pretty small by Bitcoin and Ethereum and even Solana standards. So it's very early days. You can think of this as like being sort of like Bitcoin in 2012 or 2013 or so. You're still early, as they say, right? So Bittensor is very heavily inspired by Bitcoin. Now, what did Bitcoin do extremely well? Well, it created one of Earth's greatest products with a 2 trillion market cap at the moment. It took a while for it to do it. And what did it do and how did it do it? Well, it basically created a new form of money and an alternate universe SWIFT system for moving the money around, so completely outside of the normal monetary and banking system. And to do that, the network had to incentivize other people to become nodes in this alternate universe SWIFT system. So those nodes were called Bitcoin miners, and they would confirm the blocks and the transactions that happened in the Bitcoin network. And they would donate, if you will, electricity and CPU, to process the transactions in the network and to form the blocks. These people were not being paid. They were asked to do it. And the reward that they got for it were these coins called Bitcoins. And in the early days, they earned quite a bit for processing very small numbers of transactions because the network was very young. Eventually, in aggregate, all of these miners processing all these transactions formed the world's largest supercomputer in aggregate by several orders of magnitude. And that's true even today, even with AI. An AI GPU will not catch up with it for the foreseeable 4 or 5 years at the soonest. So Bitcoin is the world champion in incentivization of others to supply GPU, smarts, electricity to maintain the network, right? So the Bittensor people said, that's a really interesting dynamic. The one thing that they sort of noticed about Bitcoin that they didn't like was that the process of mining basically consists of guessing the hash of the previous block, which is pretty much guessing the gumballs in the number of gumballs in a jar by using brute force, right? And they're all sort of trying as many, it's like unwrapping Wonka bars, right? Really fast, trying to look for the golden ticket. And that's the competition, right? So it's kind of a dumb competition. I don't want to belittle Bitcoin because it's extremely valuable in terms of preserving the security of the entire system. So it's extremely valuable from that perspective. But the act of, what they're actually doing with all that GPU is not that great, right? It's not that smart. It's not that efficient. So the Bittensor people said, well, what if instead of doing that, we incentivize people to produce great AI? That is another activity which requires a large amount of electricity and GPU. And, we can basically create these contests where people who would maybe normally be mining Bitcoin would instead be reallocating that hardware and electricity to mine TAO. And the way they do it is by competing in these contests that are set up called subnets to create a product for AI or some other. It doesn't have to be AI, although it's largely AI at the moment. Some of it's AI infrastructure, so it's not directly AI, but some of it is directly AI. So basically set up a problem, a subnet, for people to solve. And the people who solve it the best, the miners who solve it the best, they are rewarded in the new TAO token emissions that the blockchain throws off with every block, right? So just like Bitcoin miners earn Bitcoin with every block, so too do TAO miners earn TAO by producing AI and by producing useful AI or other product. So that's the basic idea. And like Bitcoin, it's early days, but it's been extremely successful at producing very good results. Okay, now let's have a look at the subnets themselves. So this is a site called Backprop Finance. There are a number of sites, just like with regular crypto. There's CoinGecko and CoinMarketCap. This is sort of the CoinGecko, CoinMarketCap of the subnet universe inside of Bittensor. So I've talked about the TAO token, and that's sort of the base token of the entire ecosystem. Inside that ecosystem, there are other tokens, and the tokens correspond to the subnets that I described earlier, each of which is solving some sort of AI problem. In aggregate, the total market cap of this universe is around 500 million or so, and these are the subnets. So this is Shoots, which is the biggest subnet, and it's ranging around 100 million in valuation. It was over 100 million just last night, and it was the first subnet to cross 100 million. Gradients, Targon, proprietary trading network. So this one predicts prices. This is an AI network which predicts prices of stocks and cryptos. Shoots allows anyone to. It basically competes with AWS. So if you want to set up your own instance of DeepSeek or Mistral or whatever, Shoots provides that for you. You just go to their site. I'm going to show some of this stuff later. And you can, with a couple clicks of a button, set up your own DeepSeek instance. So it provides hosting. And the interesting thing is it's doing it at an 85% cost savings to Amazon Web Services or any of the other sort of centralized hosting services. So it's serverless AI on demand. And the reason why they can provide it so cheaply is because the people who are providing the hosting earn TAO tokens. They're earning emissions from the network. They're effectively being subsidized, right, by the TAO emissions. So it's like being a Bitcoin miner and you produce a product, but you're earning Bitcoin the whole time for producing that product, right? Now, Shoots also charges a little bit of TAO for the hosting so that they do have a revenue model. Some of these have revenue models, some of them don't. Some of them will have it in the future. Some of these are buying back their own tokens. Which I'll get into in a second, but these are the actual tokens, and each one of these you can think of them sort of like ERC20s, sort of the Ethereum token equivalent inside of the Bittensor universe, and so this has taken off like a bat out of hell. About 9 weeks ago is when the Subnet tokens launched. These are called alpha tokens or DTAO tokens, and this universe went from about 50 million market cap up to around 500 million in the space of 9 weeks. So the entire ecosystem 10x'd. And if you actually compare these subnets here to their VC-backed, regular world, if you will, AI company counterparts, these are wildly undervalued. Most of the counterparts in the real world, if you will, are worth billions of dollars, tens of billions, sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars. The biggest one here is worth 100 million. So there's a huge opportunity here, I think, in terms of these subnet tokens, which we're going to get into in a little bit. But let me just keep going with the descriptions. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how do I get into this cool little world, right? So to start off, you have to buy some TAO tokens. You can get them on Kraken, or you can get them on Coinbase. Binance has them also. And you need to get a TAO wallet, a Bittensor wallet. And you can get that. It's a Chrome plugin. You can get the link on the Bittensor website. And it's just like MetaMask in a lot of ways. It's different in some other ways because the network operates differently. It's a little bit quirky and weird. It's not as user-friendly as MetaMask or Phantom or things like that. So you have to kind of get used to how it is. But it is a Chrome plugin. It's largely the same thing that you're probably used to if you've used wallets before. And once you have the Chrome plugin, you got yourself a little bit of TAO. You move it from your centralized exchange into your Chrome TAO wallet, and you're now ready to start buying subnet tokens. Okay, so now I'm on another site called TAO Stats. It's very similar to Backprop, except this is sort of the space shuttle cockpit version. It shows you a lot more information, which is very helpful. I use this as my main, when I'm trading in and out of tokens, I like to sort of see lots of things that are going on. So I use this one when I'm actually trading. I use Backprop when I want to sort of scan and see what's happening at a glance. It's sort of better for that, in my opinion. So let's click on Shoots. So now this is the sort of Shoots internal page. Here's the graph. We've all seen this before. Market cap 89 million, volume blah 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 blah, circulating supply. So this is the number of subnet tokens that have currently been emitted. And this is so what's really interesting about how Bittensor does things is there is a Uniswap, as you can see. Obviously, I'm trading in and out of subnet tokens. However, the Bittensor TAO Uniswap is baked directly into the Bittensor chain. The chain itself is the exchange. There is no sort of alternate exchange. That this is the only exchange that exists in the Bittensor universe. And when a new subnet is born, what happens is tokens are emitted sort of in a flood into the liquidity pool inside of this AMM, inside of this Uniswap-like thing, as part of the boot up process. And they sort of gush in really fast at first, right? So, it starts off with zero subnet tokens and zero TAO in the pool. And then the blockchain itself starts emitting the liquidity for this trading pair. So it'll emit a whole bunch of subnet tokens, and it'll emit some TAO to sort of start filling the pool up, right? So you might see new subnets have a market cap of $1 trillion, right? And that's because what they're doing is while they're booting up liquidity, it's extremely expensive to come in here and buy the new tokens. So what that means is there is a method to this madness. It sounds kind of insane, but what it does is it prevents whales from coming in and buying up all the tokens really early. You can't do it until the liquidity and the pricing is reasonable. And it takes like several weeks for this to happen. The prices are just outlandish of the subnet tokens until there's enough liquidity in the pool. So it is really a fair launch, right? You can start scaling in as the price of the token starts coming down and becoming more reasonable as the liquidity starts going up, as more subnet tokens and more TAO is emitted into the pool. So this is obviously a very healthy pool. You can see the amount of TAO in this pool is 26% versus the alpha tokens, which is 74% roughly. So this is an example of a very healthy pool. It's been around for a while. There will, just like TAO proper and just like Bitcoin, there will eventually be 21 million Shoots subnet tokens. At the moment, there's only 805. Why? Because they're being produced with every block. They're being emitted into the pool. Now, when subnets first launch, I tried to measure. So the question is like, how much dilution am I getting if I buy some of these subnet tokens right now? And the answer is it varies based on the age of the subnet. When subnets launched roughly 9 weeks ago, after a few weeks, I started dipping my toe in and started buying some subnet tokens and started trying to measure what my dilution was. It's not easy to figure out, but my observed dilution at that time, this was like maybe 3 weeks after launch, was 2.5%. So compounded, that meant that the subnet needed to go up in value 75% just for me to retain, to basically tread water in terms of the real world dollar value of my tokens, right? So that's come down quite a bit in most subnets. Now the average that I'm seeing from subnets that launched in that period is about 1%. So you're getting about 1% dilution per day, which ends up being something like 25% a month, something like that. So quite a bit less than what it is. So the dilution factor is going down quite a bit. So it's normalizing and becoming pretty reasonable now. But here's the thing that's really interesting, because these subnets, the valuation, the market caps are so low, even now, with respect to the real world venture backed AI companies. For example, Shoots has the highest valuation at 100 million. The real world corollary, probably 10 billion, maybe 5 billion in terms of its market cap, doing the exact same thing. Shoots is undercutting its price by 85%. That will normalize at some point, right? Like if these AI products are real, that disequilibrium the arbitrage between them will start to even out, which should mean, and this is not financial advice, it's my opinion, but it should mean that the subnet token for Shoots, it should like at least 10x, right? Get up to $1 billion market cap. Maybe it'll even start being equivalent to the real world versions of it. So that's the bet, right? So if you think it's going to 10x, do you really mind that you're getting 25%, or less? Because it's always decreasing. The dilution is always decreasing. If you're getting 25% dilution per month, but it's going to 10x, do you really care that much about the 25% dilution? So that's sort of the calculation here. Okay, so now let's talk about this little row down here. These are the emissions. So what does this stuff mean? So the way that emissions are rewarded from the blockchain, the emissions, the TAO Bittensor blockchain rewards the bulk of the emissions to the subnets that have the highest market cap. So Shoots has the highest market cap in the entire system. So they get 17% of the emissions. Why? Because their market cap is, roughly 20% of the entire ecosystem, right? We said earlier that the entire ecosystem had a $5 million market cap roughly. And Shoots is at around 100 million. So it's roughly 20%. So why is this 17.3%? Well, because the emissions calculation lags a little bit behind the real world, just so that people can't game the system. So it's got some inertia to it. So it's sort of, the emissions are hard to move around. If Shoots sustains itself at 20% of the market cap of the entire ecosystem, then it will eventually receive 20% of the emissions. So that's the basic idea here. So if you own Shoots subnet tokens, you are sharing in that very large emission, right? So it behooves you to own the tokens that are getting the biggest chunk of emissions. It's like being part of the best mining pools in Bitcoin, right? You don't want to be with the schlumpy guys that aren't never getting any coins. You want to be with the big whales that are, consistently earning the most Bitcoin, right? So it's kind of the same idea here. So this is the number of raw TAO that is emitted. And I'm lying a little bit, and I'll clarify in a second. So the way you can think about this is the owner of the subnet, they get 224 TAO worth of tokens every single day. So creating a valuable subnet in this ecosystem is very valuable, right? Like if you succeed the way Shoots has, you're earning 224 times, $300 right now worth of emissions. And it's denominated in TAO, although it is not exactly TAO tokens. You are earning your emissions in the alpha token, right? So you're actually earning it in Shoots tokens, but you are getting 224 Shoots tokens, 224 in TAO worth of Shoots tokens, if that makes sense, right? So it's denominated in TAO here. So, if you want to figure it out, just multiply the price of TAO, $300 times 224. Now you have the dollar amount. The miners are getting 510 TAO worth of emissions. The validators are also getting 510 TAO. Now, so what are validators? Well, I've talked about the fact that there are people competing to solve AI problems. Those are the miners. Each subnet has 256 miners at the moment. That will soon be thousands. And the miners are all supplying the AI and the GPU, crunching that stuff to produce, basically competing to get the emissions. And so each subnet also has its own sort of, Hunger Games contest, if you will, of miners all competing in the Hunger Games to earn the TAO. And whoever solves the AI or the set out problem by the subnet the best wins the most miner emissions. So the Hunger Games are ongoing. Anyone can compete. Anyone can add their server and start, adding AI and competing for the emissions. So who are the validators? Well, the validators are the judges of the Hunger Games. They're the ones who decide which miners did the best. And all the validators, they're sort of like, they basically have to come to agreements on, which miners did the best. So it's sort of like a proof of stake system where the validators, are watching the transactions and come to consensus on who did the best. And it's the exact same thing here. It's another blockchain consensus mechanism. And all the validators have to stake TAO in order to be validators. And the miners have to stake TAO in order to be miners in the system. And the subnet owners, it costs some TAO for them to set up their subnet, right? So it is sort of a proof of stake system, even though it's very Bitcoin-like with the 21 million. Bitcoin economics but some Ethereum-like thinking has gone into the rest of this. And so the validators are the judges of the Hunger Games. And as a reward for being judges, they also earn emissions. Now, we as mere mortal people who own subnet tokens, where do our emissions come from? Well, we get a chunk of the validators. So remember I said the validators have to stake TAO in order to participate in the system as validators. Where does that TAO come from? Well, they put some of it up themselves, but we the people out here, we're just wallets full of subnet tokens. We choose which validator to stake our TAO with, so that we can earn emissions. We earn a percentage of whatever that validator makes. And the validators that have the most stakers backing them make the most, right? So they're always out there competing for our business as stakers of these subnet tokens, right? So that they want us to back them. So they want to be seen as honest. They want to be seen as doing a good job, reputable. So they live and die based on how much subnet token and TAO or how much subnet token we are backing them with. So that's what this means, and that's how we earn our TAO, right? So as you can see here, I've got in this particular wallet, I have delegated 822.9 shoots subnet tokens to a validator. So I'm going to go and see who I'm with. Yeah, so my validator that I've decided to back is TAO.com. Here's a whole bunch of the validators, TAOstats and Corcel. They run the TAOstats.io website, so they're the default. So if you don't go in here and change it, because you're using their site, you'll default to backing their validators, right? So that's TAOstats and Corcel. Here are sort of some of the rest of the validators. And, most of these I know. Most of these I actually know some of the people behind them. Yuma, this is Barry Silbert's company. So if you want to back Barry Silbert and his validator, you would choose this as the subnet validator that you are backing. The rest of these are kind of faceless, and we don't know who these people are. So if you're just an address, probably not going to make it. You're not going to be one of the big validators. But if you are, Kraken is validating now too. That's actually very interesting. So this is the first time we've had a major centralized exchange validating a subnet. So very, very interesting dynamic. And Binance also is in the mixer. They're not validating and they're not mining, but they are backing subnets. They've backed one of our subnets, which I'll get into down the road a little bit. But Binance, Kraken, Barry Silbert via Yuma are now participating in this ecosystem. So it's become extremely, extremely interesting. Okay, so we've talked about Shoots. So this is the Shoots website. And let's go see what this is. Serverless AI compute. Deploy, run, and scale any AI model in seconds. Try directly through our platform or our easy-to-use API in seconds. So what does this mean? Well, you've heard about DeepSeek. If you wanted to run it yourself, you can just go to Shoots, fire up an instance, and get it going, and off you go. So a lot easier than going to AWS or some of these other centralized services. These guys are a lot cheaper and usually a lot faster and a lot better. So DeepSeek was up and running on this like almost within an hour of its release. These guys are absolutely amazing at getting the newest hotness up and running and available to their customers. So as you can see, sort of the popular models are here: Mistral, Llama. Some of these I'm not familiar with, but they basically got a pretty wide selection of models here. So pretty cool. And as I said, they're offering them at an 85% cost savings over pretty much everyone else. And how are they doing that? Well, they are subsidized by earning the TAO and their subnet tokens, right? So they're basically getting, just like how Uber was subsidized by venture capital money. Like, is this a bad thing? Is this a wrong thing? It's just a thing. It's a different way of doing stuff, right? Bitcoin did it by subsidizing the boot up of their network, by rewarding everyone in Bitcoin tokens, which eventually became extremely valuable. Those people did extremely well. Uber, venture capitalists, subsidized each ride for like the better part of maybe 13, 14 years. So more than a decade for sure. You paid $30 for an Uber ride. 15 of those dollars were paid for by the billions in venture capital money that were given to Uber. So, eventually they became profitable, and they did it by doing other businesses other than their sort of core business. But the economics of their core business did not work right away. So, so this is kind of the same thing. So these AI products are booting up in a subsidized environment, except the subsidies are coming from this Bitcoin-like entity, the blockchain, which is emitting these Bitcoin-like coins, which are valuable in this ecosystem, not only by themselves, but basically as staking in order to participate in greater and greater ways in the ecosystem, right? So during the Ethereum ICO phase, you had to own Ethereum in order to buy the ICOs, right? So that created a lot of demand for Ethereum. It went from 50 cents per ETH up to about 4,500 per ETH. And it did so because of the demand that was created by these ICOs. We can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it did create the demand. And that sort of demand creation is exactly what the United States did in 1971 when it came off the gold standard and cut a deal with Saudi Arabia that Saudi Arabia would require dollars, United States dollars, in order to purchase Saudi oil. So the United States dollar, it accrued its value. It basically was valuable because you needed it. You had to go get some of it in order to buy Saudi oil. So it was a utility token. The United States dollar was a utility token for the Saudi oil app. To get energy, you needed dollars. So we've seen this. This is not a terrible model. It's just a different way of doing things. So that's my little speech on subnets, the morality of doing things in this way. It's been done, very big products have done it this way in the past. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Okay, now we're going to have a look at gradients. So gradients is also one of the top 10 Bittensor subnets. It's subnet number 56. So this is a little chart that popped up, pretty interesting on X. Gradients is training for AI models. So they basically, plug and play AI model training. You can upload your data and it'll feed it into the model for you. And it is outperforming big company AI, and it is cheaper, as you can see here from this graph. So, AWS, basically here's the cost per hour. The best price, basically for $5 an hour, you get 65% performance improvement over AWS and some of these other things. So the lesson here is pretty, why is it cheaper and why is it so much better? Partly because of the subsidies, but also because you have these miners that are competing with each other to get emissions, and they want the most emissions, so they're being cleverer and cleverer and cleverer. And in the same way that, Linux, the operating system, the open source operating system, because the entire world was working on it and improving it and sharing it, and because it was a freemium model, sort of like this, it was subsidized in some way, it became the dominant operating system over OS2, over Microsoft Windows NT, because those centralized companies were competing with the whole world, and they were competing with this freemium model, right? So you're not going to beat all the brains in the world and the economics of the freemium model. Like it's too much. So you have the same effect now applying via the Bittensor network and this incentivization mechanism in the, using TAO, using a blockchain, using a Bitcoin-like dynamic. You have the exact same thing going on here. And so that is why this subnet, Gradients, this is why Gradients is able to outperform these big company competitors. It's outperforming AWS, it's outperforming Google Cloud, and it's outperforming Together AI. So you just can't, that's just going to keep happening, right? So, okay, so I'm just going to do a little flyby here of backprop and talk about, each subnet one at a time. Shoots, we've talked about. Gradients. Targon is basically competing with Shoots. They're sort of I've heard it described as sort of the VC-backed version. I don't know much about them. I'm about to visit them in Austin, Texas, so I'll know more after I visit them. So I'll reserve commentary until after I actually sit down with them. Proprietary trading network, it's kind of what it sounds like. They're basically using AI to do price prediction. Compute subnet, don't really know what that is. Oh, Templar is pretty interesting. So Templar is decentralized training. So, you've heard that in order to do training with AI models, you need a giant amount of GPU, right? You need a bunch of NVIDIA chips. And so the only people who can do training at that scale are people like Elon Musk, right? That own Grok, that own like giant server farms, AWS, Microsoft, Google. Those entities can do training at scale. What Templar is, it's a Bittensor subnet, which does decentralized training. So you have all these GPU clusters that are disaggregated everywhere in different data centers. They come together and gang up to create a supercomputer, a supercluster, which does the training in a decentralized fashion and then offers that massive in aggregate training server farm to the world as a product, right? So they are not Amazon, they are not Google, and yet they can still offer the same product at quite a reduced price, most likely, right? So that's what Templar is, and they're the world's only decentralized training network, so far as I know at this moment. Nova, I've had them on hash rate. They are pharmacule hunters, so they're using AI to hunt pharmaceutical molecules. And they told me something very interesting. They could not do this business in any other way other than a Bittensor way. Venture capitalists would not back them because the kind of pharmaceutical molecules that they're hunting they're very difficult to find. So the VCs would not back this business because it's too speculative. And it's the sort of thing where it's like, if you're in SETI and you're hunting for alien signals and you've got like the big dish antennas, you're probably going to hear nothing, right? We've been listening for 30 years. As far as we know, we've heard nothing, right? So, but if you do hear something, it's the biggest thing that's ever happened, right? So that's what Nova is. It's basically using the power of decentralized AI and the Bittensor motivation network to hunt pharmaceutical molecules that VCs would not back the hunting of. Dataverse, it's a market of training data. You can go there, swipe a card, buy some training data. They got everything. It's crazy eddies, any kind of training data you need. So they're continually stocking their floors with more and more different types of training data. Let's see, Hippias. Trying to remember what they are. They are, they're sort of like Filecoin, but it's the Bittensor version of it. So it's decentralized storage. So not really AI, but AI does need storage, right? So they're providing AI infrastructure to the other participants in the ecosystem. So Hippias is sort of like the Bittensor version of Filecoin, if you will, decentralized file system, and ultimately competing with AWS, right? So Filecoin is wildly cheaper than storage is wildly cheaper than AWS. It's like a 10-to-1 ratio. I imagine Hippias is going to be the same thing, perhaps even more so. All right, so some of these I know, some of these I don't. Sturdy is a DeFi platform, so basically using AI to power DeFi, find the best yields for things. Sports Tensor, predicting sports scores. So they're using AI to predict, who's going to win, the next game, and they're sort of doing the Moneyball thing where they're looking at the stats and they're crunching and trying to figure out who's going to win. And in order to get their predictions, you have to pay them using their own token. So they are doing the utility token model, which Gary Gensler did not allow us to do for 4 years or 6 years or whatever it was. So I don't think the utility token model, people poo-poo it as like, oh, it didn't work. Well, it didn't work because Gary Gensler sued anyone who tried it, right? And the only thing he didn't sue were meme coins, which is why we got this giant proliferation of meme coins, and all the kind of cool stuff that we wanted to do got buried in the dirt. It's coming back now that Gary's gone. There are people trying it again. So Sports Tensor, trying the utility token model, you got to pay them in Sports Tensor, Subnet, Bittensor, Subnet tokens, their own token, in order to get their predictions. So we'll see how that works out for them. And you can see the market cap here, 3 million. So extremely low, right? We're only at the number 25th most popular AI subnet. As you can see that, they sort of scaled down from now 90 million for shoots. Kind of middle of the pack of the top 10 is like, 24 million. Nova, that pharmaceutical, the pharma hunters, the pharma molecule hunters, 16 million roughly, right? So, if this were a venture-backed company, that would be in the billions, like right out of the gate, right? So you can see how there's a sort of, it's almost insane that these things exist at such low market caps at this time. The reason why, and just a little side note here, the reason why the market caps are so low is because this is a hard universe to understand. It's a hard universe to get into, right? Just like Bitcoin was in the early days. You had to go to Mt. Gox. you had to get some squirrely wallet that was really hard to understand. And you had to, wire your money to Mt. Gox. That took like a week, and it's going to Japan. So you don't really know, when's it going to get there? Finally gets there, you buy some Bitcoin, and the Mt. Gox user interface is not easy for most people to understand. But, and then you get your Bitcoin back in your wallet, which you did want to do because it's Mt. Gox and it's going to fold and die, right? So you want to get your Bitcoin back in your possession. So, basically knowing your way around that network and figuring those things out was difficult. This is also difficult right now, but that also means there's a massive opportunity, just like there was buying Bitcoin on Mt. Gox back in the early days. Right. So, which is something I did do. I did do that. And that's how I got my first Bitcoin in 2013. I bought it on Mt. Gox. And just like that, I have found my way around these Bittensor subnets. I've gotten the Chrome Bittensor wallet plugin. I've learned my way around TAOstats.io. I've gotten to know what some of these subnets are. That's all hard-won knowledge, right? So, but there's an opportunity, and that's not going to be that way forever. And I don't think it's going to be that way much longer. And I'm going to talk about that towards the end of this podcast. But right now, if you can figure out this universe, maybe a 10x kind of multiplier on that knowledge. So, not financial advice, it's just what I think. So, okay, so sort of scrolling down here a little bit, Dippy Roleplay. So these guys make a agent which is downloadable as an app on the iPhone, and it's extremely popular. It's they've got millions of downloads. They're using the AI produced by Bittensor, their subnet, which is just a chatbot, right? So they've got an AI that's a chatbot. It's a personality. And some portion of that, it's not all of it, but some portion of that is produced by their Bittensor subnet. The idea is that eventually a lot more of it will be produced by their Bittensor subnet. 2.1 million for something which has, millions of downloads as a real world app. And these things are extremely popular, by the way. I had them on Hashrate also. You can go look it up. These guys are great. I love what they're doing. And they're in a sector which is hot and growing, these AI chatbots, right? So, Storb is another Filecoin like thing. It's storage. So you can see, Gaia here. This is, Gaia is weather prediction. So they're basically a decentralized, take the training data in, take the real time feeds in, and predict the weather and provide it sort of in this open source format. So anyway, long story short, you can see that these things are real world applications. The ones that are valued the most by the Bittensor subnet purchasers will do very well, and you will do extremely well if you bought those subnet tokens early. But it's also easy to die, right? So if you spend your TAO on a bad subnet and the subnet goes nowhere, or it turns out to be a scam, or it collapses, it's very easy to lose your TAO. So just buyer beware, just like anything. Just like Ethereum tokens, just like Solana tokens. You never know when a subnet's a scam. Although I've looked at most of these personally, and like 90% of these are, for sure are legit, right? Again, my opinion. But I have looked pretty deeply at it. I've talked to the people. They're not faceless meme coin peddlers, right? So as another example of the real world applications of Bittensor AI, a friend of mine, Fred Krueger, and his partner, Ben Sigmund, recently launched a new product called Degen Predict. It's a polymarket-like thing on Solana, and they sort of thought it through a little bit differently, so it's very interesting. I urge you to go check it out, degenpredict.com. But anyway, they had an AI problem. They're providing a prediction. Anybody can set up any prediction market, which creates a problem, right? Because how do you then decide who won the bet, right? If you're going to have millions and millions of these markets, right, which is quite a bit more than Polymarket offers. If you're doing the long tail of prediction markets, the only thing which is reasonable, which is going to decide who won a market, is an AI, right? So the problem of producing a judge AI is an extremely difficult one, right? 90% of the time, it'll definitely get it right, but AIs hallucinate sometimes. So that last 10% or 1% or even 1% of 1% where it gets it wrong, right? You just cannot have it in one of these prediction markets. So instead of trying to create his own AI, or he did create his own AI, Fred created his own AI to be a judge, but he realized that if he set up a Bittensor subnet and invited the world to gang up on this problem and try to solve this problem of being an AI judge for a prediction market, he would get orders of magnitude better results. So he set up Subnet 90 as DGen predicts, judicial, basically verifies whether a statement is true after a period of time has passed, right? Something like Donald Trump will win the election, right? We could debate whether you like that or not, but that's the statement. And after November, is it true or is it false, right? The AI would be able to definitively, by reading news, by sort of going out there and looking around, tell you whether that was a true or false statement. So that problem for sort of long tail things gets, the weirder and more obscure those statements become, the more of a challenge it is for an AI to get it right. So Fred specifically set up a subnet because he knew it would be a much better result, orders of magnitude better. So that, to me, that was a very interesting tell, right? Because Fred is the kind of guy that if this was all bullshit, he just would have been like, you know what, I'm not gonna participate in that Bittensor stuff. Who cares about that? I'm just gonna hire some guys. I'm gonna raise some money. Fred has lots of resources. He could have done it any way he chose, and he chose to do it this way because this way was better. And he is not the only one who's going to make that choice once they figure out what this is. So another dynamic that's at play here, Balaji recently posted something that I thought was really interesting. He said, we all thought we were going to get the Cathedral AI. So by that he meant, big companies like OpenAI, like Google, like Microsoft, like Amazon, controlling the artificial intelligence. It would be one AI that knew everything, and we would all have to use it because only the big companies had enough GPU, had enough NVIDIA chips to power both the inference, sort of computing the answers, as well as the training, right? You needed a giant amount of compute for both. That's where we thought this was headed. That's where I thought this was headed. Then along came DeepSeek. And DeepSeek was the Chinese knockoff of ChatGPT and other things, the other AIs like Grok, et cetera, where they used considerably yet less NVIDIA chips and GPU to produce a better result, both in terms of inference and in terms of training. And they basically proved the point that, if you're clever and you break up the problem kind of differently, you can do a lot more with a lot less. That changed the dynamic entirely. So we are no longer in the monotheistic Cathedral universe of AI, the mainframe version of AI, where we thought we were going. We are now in the PC-like, Bazaar-like, lots of little drone swarm version of AI. So there are going to be lots of subnets, right? The subnet architecture of lots of highly specialized vertical AI applications, millions of them, each one an expert in their little field. Like I know everything about shoes. If you got a question about shoe, I'm the shoe AI. That AI charging other AIs, like this other AI that's trying to solve, a macroeconomic problem of some sort, needs to know certain things about shoes. It's going to ask the expert shoe AI in the drone swarm, like, hey, so what about this? And this is going to charge that AI for the answer, right? So you're going to have all these little AIs that are vertical experts charging one another, working together as these drone swarms to produce. It's this Bazaar-like AI effect, right? So what do you want for that kind of an environment? You want Bittensor. You want TAO. You want to be able to invest in the subnet tokens of these little vertical AI agents that are the experts in one little vertical. And you want commerce to be taking place between the verticalized AIs and the generalized AIs, right? So that's the world we're headed towards, just as a general trend. And the cost of AI, the price of AI for the end user heads towards zero. It doesn't hit totally zero, but the OpenAI way of doing it, where they're burning billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of billions, is unsustainable. That sort of centralized, venture-backed, giant, monolithic company model is not going to win this. And we've seen this in compu history many times, right? We've seen the PC beat out the mainframe. We saw the internet beat out AOL and CompuServe, right? Like we've seen this fractal many, many times. And I think it's going to repeat here, and so does Balaji. So that bodes very, very well for the Bittensor universe. Now, there are two other trends here with Bittensor TAO that are very important to recognize. The first one is what I mentioned earlier. It's a very difficult universe to get into. You have to have the Chrome plugin. You have to stand TAO stats or backprop. And it's sort of difficult to figure out what's going on here and use all that stuff for the average user, not for some of us, but for the average user, way too hard. That's about to change, right? So the reason why the market caps are so low compared to their real world counterparts is because this world is too hard to get into. What you really want is, hi, I'm random person. I have a phantom wallet on Solana. It's loaded up with a bunch of Sol. I want to buy Subnet tokens. And I just go somewhere, plug in my phantom wallet, and I'm buying shoots. I'm buying gradients. I'm buying Dippy. I'm buying whatever subnet interests me today, right? And I don't want to worry about staking or any of that stuff. That world is coming. There are multiple parties that are working on Solana versions of this, where there's wrap tokens over on Solana. Same thing with Ethereum. Probably some other blockchains as well. I would imagine the centralized exchanges will soon start listing subnet tokens. Subnet tokens are transferable between wallets. So that means a centralized exchange can list them. So Kraken is already playing around with validating. My guess is they will be the first one to list a subnet token. My guess, not financial advice, but it is my guess, is that they will list shoots first because it is the biggest one with $100 million in valuation. One of the big, they love volume, so it's got one of the biggest volumes. And I think probably subnet tokens will continue to be listed by these centralized exchanges, probably Binance, maybe Coinbase. We'll see. They're definitely getting more adventurous. And once that happens, I believe, and it stands to reason, there will be a flood of liquidity from these other ecosystems that can flow into Bittensor subnet tokens, and their valuations will start to mirror their real world non-crypto counterparts. They will start being valuated, appropriately, frankly, based on the value that they're offering and the price that they offer to end users. So I think that's going to happen. How big of an effect will that have? I don't know, but I'm going to say 10x. Again, not financial advice, but my opinion. So that, once those liquidity gates open, you have a really great product that's consumer friendly. People are going to rush in. It's going to be a big flood in. It's like meme coins, but these are legit real world things. But I think basically, people will start betting on them like they bet on everything else. And once they're available, the appeal of meme coins will kind of diminish and the appeal of these things will tend to go up, I believe. So that's what I think is about to happen. And I think that happens within the next 6 months, maybe 3 months. So that's dynamic one. Dynamic two is within the Bittensor universe itself. Never mind the wider world and the wider liquidity. There's about, as I said, $2.5 billion worth of TAO that exists inside of the Bittensor universe. So where is that TAO and how is it divided up? Well, 28.35% of it is on wallets. So TAO is providing liquidity on Binance, right? So a lot of that actually is just TAO in the liquidity pool on Binance. A lot of it is just TAO sitting in people's wallets in their sock drawer, right? So some people bought TAO. They don't really know much about this universe, so they just know they should hold TAO, and they hold it, and they don't really know why. And so it's just in a wallet somewhere. Remember I talked about TAO on root, right? If you are not buying subnet tokens, you can stake it on root, which is, not, there's no product. It's just you're staked on the root of the TAO blockchain. And for doing that, that's about a 16%, 17% APY, although that is diminishing over time as subnet. The idea is to retire the root emissions in favor of subnet emissions to force everybody out of root that wants to earn emissions and to bet and to pick a subnet. Now, there's a lot of people who don't want to do that, right? They're very comfortable earning their 16, 17%, whatever it is. It's a little bit variable, but that's the average. And it turns out that 65% of TAO holders, right? 65.68% of TAO holders would rather just sit and root and not do anything. But they're about to be forced out over the next 2 months or so. This is going to go down towards zero. So they're going to lose the sweet 16 to 17% emissions. And they're going to be forced to pick some horses over in the race over here. Roughly 6% of all TAO is now in subnets. So it's less than 1/10 of all TAO, right? Roughly around 1/20th of all of TAO is in subnets. That's a very tiny amount. As this root subnet tokens, these root guys start getting forced out from lack of emissions, some portion of them are going to start heading into subnets, and they're probably just going to pick the blue chips, right? Like, who's at the top? I don't know. I'll buy shoots. That's my guess. So, this is probably another 5 to 10x, right? Let's just say it's 10x, right? If just without any outside liquidity coming in, just inside the TAO ecosystem, if the top subnets, roughly 10x, and you got this exterior effect of liquidity on Solana and Ethereum and other places, new money coming into TAO as an overall, you got 10 times 10, that's a 100x. Not financial advice. But I'm just looking at the numbers here, and it sort of more or less looks like that's what's about to happen to me. So I think this is the Bittensor TAO tidal wave that is incoming. And I think all these trends compound upon one another. And I think the result of this is that, today this is a $2.5 billion coin. But I think at scale, this heads up to $1 trillion, like Bitcoin. I think it, or Ethereum at the very least, right? So Ethereum sort of ranges between $200 and $400 billion worth of value, right? Even Solana is at $120 billion worth of value. So I think this is the third great coin after Ethereum. It might surpass Ethereum. Barry Silbert was just on Raoul Paul's podcast. He thought this had the potential to be bigger than Bitcoin. And if that's true, then that's bigger than $2 trillion today. Right. So that's, the multiples could be very big here. And, at the very least, I think this has got like a very big growth potential over the next year or so. We've never been in a better regulatory environment. So things like TAO will continue to be legal. You got David Sachs, who is keeping AI open at the White House level. So I look at all these trends and I think, we're sort of, at the very least, TAO is the third great coin, taking its rightful place alongside Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think we're in the very early days of it. I think it's like 2013 or so. Barry Silbert thinks the same thing. Binance clearly suspects the same thing because they're starting to participate in this ecosystem. So that is what Bittensor is. That is what TAO is. That's what subnet tokens are. That's how you can buy them. These are my thoughts on this matter. I have done many hash rates on Bittensor subnets. I will continue to do hash rates on them. I think this is the most interesting thing going on in crypto right now. And now you've heard my thoughts, and I hope you understand this a little bit better. If you have questions, ask them on X. Don't ask them on YouTube. I pay attention to X. If you ask a question on X, ask it in public so everyone can benefit from the answer. I'm happy to answer questions. This has been Hash Rate. My voice is tired. My name is Mark Jeffrey. We'll see you next time.
Have the AI observe the quantum double slit experiment. If it's able to collapse the wave function in exactly the same way as a human observer, then it's conscious like we are. There's someone at home in there.
Armand, your own father was part of Concordia. It was they who ordered him to produce the Musepocalypse. I'm chasing machine consciousness. Who will be first to make a soul in a mind made of metal? A real soul, electric sentience.
Metatronic.
This is a synchronicity engine. It is used to calculate a path through the world, one that produces favorable chance occurrences in order to obtain a specific result.
Look out! Drive faster!
I now know how to create an electronic peripheral that will allow for true conscious machines.
So this is the Atman project. This is not what I expected. Where are the military training camps?
Concordia believes that consciousness is primary, matter secondary. Reality, matter itself, is just a vibrational construct of frozen thought.
Here is a tale of a man's deeds and desires, of his quantum choices, of madness and twisted wires, his astrology encrypted and hidden from view. Only pyramids and shadows know the things that he'll do. Stop. Listen, I'll make you a deal. Me for them.
Your father didn't merely die in the challenges. Oh no, Verinder killed him.